Hello, this is Paul Jansen from United Reformed Church in Somerville, New Jersey, coming to you on the weekend of August 6th, 2023. We have communion on the first Sunday of every month, and so I'll be making significant reference to that in this weekend's meditation. And I'll also be speaking as though I were speaking to the Sunday morning crowd, so I hope you'll be able to make that shift in your heads. I'm going to talk to you this week about a miracle that's been happening in the life of the church for the last 2,000 years, over and over and over again. It begins in the book of the Acts of the Apostles from the second chapter, reading verses 43 through 47. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles, and all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they sold their possessions and goods and distributed them all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they partook of food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Well, I don't know whether you ever chat with anyone after worship on a Sunday. If somebody asks you, well, how did church go? Or what might have happened in church, all the way from the always excellent quality of the music to the always yummy treats to the occasionally insightful preaching. But if perchance you should get into one of those conversations today or tomorrow, I want to encourage you to tell what happened in church as something like this. Well, we all sat together, men and women. We didn't segregate off from each other. We did the usual churchy things you might expect, but then near the end of our time together, we all sat down around a table and had a tiny little meal. So this is what I did. I sat at a table with Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians and who knows what else. And we didn't fight each other. Some folks were older, some folks were younger, but we didn't get into any of those okay boomer conversations. We weren't even close to all being members of our church, but that was okay. Some folks were kind of pretty evidently well-to-do, or at least they cleaned up pretty well. Other folks have had a bit of a rough go in life, but we didn't do any patronizing or shaming or what you might expect in some circles. We sat side by side and we ate. We had a few friends we've only met a few times, and that was wonderful, but we didn't give them the side eye or anything. If God brought them to be with us, and that's where they belong. If it's for a week or two or long time, maybe even the rest of their lives, that's okay too. Some folks seemed happy to be in worship. Others, well, I can't quite describe it, but it looked like their hearts were kind of heavy. But we don't put pressure on our church. We don't tell people that they have to be super happy and joyful when we're together. We are who we are with God. And sometimes we all hit high points and we all hit low points. And God is there through it all. A lot of folks were pretty physically fit. Others, not so much. I suppose some loved dogs and some loved cats and some both and some neither. And I suppose I could go on and on like this, but if you don't have the point by now, well. You see, we had just sung a song about being one in the Spirit and loving one another and loving the people around us. And then we sat around a table and we loved each other. Oh, mind you, we don't always love each other 100%. Sometimes we get on each other's nerves. I suppose that is the way it is with most groups of folks who've known each other for a long time. And it's true, I'll grant you, that while we are kind of diverse, we're mostly a group of white folk who've grown up in pretty similar circumstances, mostly have the same set of values, and relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the world, even to our country, we're fairly well off. We're not that diverse, whatever diverse means. And, well, I'll grant you that church probably isn't the only place where mixed or mixed up groups like us sit down and eat together, but pretty important place to me. Imagining you're having this conversation still, right? Because let me tell you why. Why such a bunch of different folks can sit down around one table with one heart and enjoy one meal. We can do this because Christ has set us free from the tyranny of the devil. Christ has set us free from the tyranny of the devil. Now, you probably didn't expect that. Seems like a bit of a reach to start talking about the devil. What that even is. For some folks, the idea of the devil never gets too far beyond the old Tom and Jerry cartoon where Jerry the mouse has to make a choice, and over one shoulder there flaps an angel with its wings, and the angel tells Jerry, do the good thing, do the right thing, and over the other shoulder is a red-fleshed devil and holding a pitchfork and says, no, do the bad thing, go get Tom, do away with him. That's kind of one prevailing image of the devil. Or there's another one, far more serious. It lives in opera and myth and story. The version of the story of Faust and the devil, where Faust made a deal to sell his soul to the devil. Like, it's in popular culture, like the musical Damn Yankees, where Joe Boyd sells his soul to the devil so his beloved Washington Senators can finally conquer the Bronx Bombers. Good news is Joe gets his soul back at the last possible second. The thing is, whether the devil looks like a cartoon or a fiend who wants your soul, those images place the devil outside of us, somewhere out there, as if there were some sort of self-generating force of evil that was eternally opposed to the goodwill of God. I know sometimes that sounds plausible, but when you think about it, really? The devil is a force that's just as strong as God? And just as eternal, so what? There's two gods? Like the witches of Oz, a good one and a bad one? No. That just won't do. That the devil is some kind of enemy is absolutely certain. No question there. But, well, to give you a hint of where I'm going, a couple of quick images. In the War of 1812, actually what I'm talking about happened in 1813, in a battle on Lake Erie, Commandant Oliver Perry engaged British warships. After he had commandeered them, he sent word to Major General William Henry Harrison, yes, that one, who would eventually be president. He sent word to him, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours. We have overtaken them." Well, then jump forward over 150 years into the future. Not long after, some of you can remember this. Remember what those pictures of the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland? The river on fire because of all the pollutants, the chemicals and whatnot in it. It's barely 100 miles away from where Commandant Perry's battle was. When the Cuyahoga River, not long after the Cuyahoga River was on fire and folks were observing the environmental devastation of the early 70s, the political cartoonist Walt Kelly drew his main character, Pogo, looking at all the destruction around him and saying, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Not, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours," but "We have met the enemy, and he is us." The tyranny of the devil, the enemy, we have met the enemy, and he is us. At most, the devil is a kind of a projection of us, of the worst of us, of the worst of what's inside us. Lead us not into temptation, we pray. Deliver us from evil. What we're praying is, deliver us from from falling victim to our own deepest urges, to our own faults, to the sin which clings so closely inside us. This is the tyranny of the devil. The universal and timeless temptation to divide this world into the good guys and the bad guys, the godly against the ungodly, the human against the unhuman. This is the tyranny, and let us all be on alert for it within ourselves. The tyranny that inevitably leads on to the desire to dehumanize, demonize, and ultimately do away with whatever them appears on the horizon, whoever we name as our enemy. Several times over the years, I've mentioned St. Augustine's definition of love, which is, I want you to be. That's the beginning of it. I desire your very existence. The tyranny of the devil is exactly the opposite. I want you not to be. Or, I want your kind, folks like you, not to be. Sometimes we soft pedal the voice of the devil. We think, oh, it's not that bad. But hey, the voice comes up all the time if you'll listen carefully to it. The voice that says, I want you not to be because your existence threatens me. Or the way you are threatens my picture of the way the world ought to be. Or what you have threatens my position in the world. So the logic goes, whether I call you an idiot or a heretic, whether I find your behaviors questionable or disgusting, whether I consider the stereotypes that I've harbored against you, whether I've considered those stereotypes to be merely unfortunate or radically destructive of all that I stand for, the tyranny within, the tyranny of the devil tells me that I am right to desire your destruction. I am fully justified in wanting you not to be. And you hear what that is. Desiring your annihilation. That's a very, very powerful urge. It's what the Apostle Paul called the human point of view. And Christ has set us free from it. Free. We don't owe that point of view. We don't owe it a moment's worth of our time, not a single cell in our brain, or even an infinitesimal twinge in our hearts. Christ has set us free. He has broken down what in his society was the greatest dividing wall between anyone, the dividing wall between Jew and Gentile. He has set us free. So when we come to the Lord's table, we eat joyfully with a mishmash of folks with whom we would never eat if we were under the tyranny of the devil. If we were always to be looking at each other who were not quite the same as us with suspicion or contempt, we look at each other and say, look at you. You are the bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. We belong together. We take the bread and the cup, and in doing so, we testify to the world, look how good it is. When brothers and sisters dwell together in unity, we are fully aware of the vast mountains of influence telling us that we should live in fear of each other. But we hold fiercely onto the mustard seed of the better way that Paul wrote about. The greatest of these is love. That's why we eat and drink together with whomever, with glad and generous hearts, which is what's been happening in the church for a couple thousand years. What an amazing gift! What an amazing gift! We ought never take it for granted. It is hugely, hugely counter-cultural. So we're going to sing. We'll sing. What the Spirit has just been whispering to us, sing it into the fullness of being, and we'll pray for the strength to become who we are. We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord. And we pray that all unity may one day be restored. And they'll know we are Christians by our love. By our love. Well, that's a good word for today, folks. I pray that God has touched you in some way as you've been listening, and may God give us all the grace to be one in the Spirit. If you're listening before Sunday and you want to come with us, you'll hear pretty much the same message, but you'll hear it with a bunch of folks with whom you can open your hearts and sing and pray and talk and just enjoy the company of God's people. Peace of Christ be with you now and always. See you next week.